I think the first one was a great conversation in terms of just setting the foundation in terms of you as a real estate developer, you're going to be engaging with communities in a lot of aspects in terms of bringing your development online, right? And another important set of folks that you will most likely, if not certainly, engage with at some point throughout the timeline of your development are going to be people that work within the public space. So I have a phenomenal panel of folks that are going to be speaking that represent a couple of different organizations and a couple of different roles within the public space and different public agencies. So if we could start off by having everybody just kind of share their name, share what organization they're with, and what role they play within that organization, that would be great. And I'm going to start with our very own Councilwoman Nikki Nice.
Wow. Well, first of all, good morning to everyone. It is early, and it's homecoming weekend, so let me apologize in advance, because I'm a proud graduate of Dear Langston University, and this is the first year in a little bit we've been able to gather, so I'm just excited. But I'm more excited to see you all, to be engaged and to be interested in Northeast Oklahoma City and how we can develop in the correct way. So my name is Nikki Nice. I am the councilwoman for Ward 7. And for all of you all who may not know, our city is 621 square miles. Ward 7 is 130, which means we are the size of Atlanta, Georgia. We are the size of Detroit, Michigan. We are the size of Las Vegas, Nevada. That's just Ward 7. You can fit either one of those cities you pick into Ward 7, and that's how big, as far as the square miles, Ward 7 is. So I know a lot of people think I just represent the east side, and I thought that too when I was running. Then I quickly found out when I went north to Edmond, oh, this is Ward 7 too. But this is a part of Northeast Oklahoma City that is near and dear to me, growing up and being raised in the community and now serving for the same place that raised me to be the woman that I have become and still evolving to be. So I think was that all I was supposed to say? Okay, thank you. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, Daisy.
Hello everyone, my name is Daisy Muñoz and I'm the Capital Access Manager for Progress OKC. Progress OKC helps to build capacity in communities of color through building homes and also with technical assistance and access to capital for small businesses. I'm also the Ward 6 representative for the MAPS 4 committee.
Thank you, Daisy. Kamal.
Good morning. My name is Camal Pennington, and my day job is I'm an attorney, and I'm the director of admissions at the College of Law at OU. But my side job is, thanks to Councilwoman Nice, is I'm the Ward 7 Planning Commissioner. And so the Oklahoma City Planning Commission has a number of duties, one of which is maintaining our comprehensive plan, the plan for growth and development of Oklahoma City, and also rezoning issues. So look forward to talking about that as well. I'm also, like Councilwoman Nice, born and raised and live in Northeast Oklahoma City. So this is my community, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you, Kamal.
Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth Larios. I work at the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City. I'm a project manager there, and I'm specifically in the partnerships planning department and policy department. And I'm also the executive director of Southwest 29th Street District Commercial District.
Good deal. So for folks that are in the building today who are developers or are looking to navigate through the space of development, what does the engagement typically look like between a developer and then you folks and the organizations that you represent? What are those conversations typically look like? Nikki, we'll start with you.
Okay. Normally what happens is anytime someone says they want to develop, if they have a representative as far as an attorney, that attorney reaches out to our office to make us aware of what's happening as far as their development is concerned. And the main thing that I do and this is all I know to do, is engaged with the community. So my question is to them, have you talked to the neighborhood? Have you talked to the people that you are building around so they understand what you're about to do? Because I heard earlier from someone in the audience saying, we are impacted by whatever happens in our communities, whether it be good or whether it be an adverse effect on our communities. We are the ones who are a part of it regardless. So I know it's been a different type of transition for a lot of developers in the last couple of years because they don't want to talk to the neighbors. And when you tell them, in order for you to get the support from me, you're going to have to talk to the neighborhood because I know my neighborhood, but where some of these developments may be, I may not be as familiar with. And I know the neighbors who live in these particular communities and these neighborhoods, you know your neighbors, you know the streets, you know the dead ends, you know the shortcuts, you know all of those things that can impact, again, in a positive or negative light as far as the community is concerned. So that's what happens as far as my office is concerned. And normally, depending on if it has to go through city council for a vote, through that zoning process that you'll hear about, then it comes back to me for that final decision. And then we go from there. Or otherwise, if it's like a private development where I don't have any say-so as far as a vote is concerned, I will highly encourage them to also talk to the community as well about what they're doing.
Yes, so Progress OKC, we are developers ourselves. We have built 9 homes in the Culbertson East Highland neighborhood. And so from there, then we engage with subcontractors, and those opportunities are opened, and we prefer minority-owned, subcontractors to then support our efforts in developing homes as well. We do have another project underway, but we have not yet fleshed it out. And other than us being developers ourselves, we do offer technical assistance. So that'd be, you want to become a developer, you don't know where to start, you're looking for resources. We do connect with developers and try to find them the best avenue or the best resource for that. And we also help them acquire capital if that's needed. We do have a microloan that's up to $15,000. That's not a lot of money if you want to become a developer. But then from that, if you're just starting, you can use that microloan as collateral for an SBA loan, which then ultimately does help you acquire capital.
That's good. Kamal.
I think it's really important. This is something to make sure that you save in your notes. Make sure that you go onto the Oklahoma City before you buy a piece of land. Always check to see how it's zoned. And if you just Google Oklahoma City Comprehensive Plan, you will get to it so that you can understand. And what we mean with the zoning is how you can use that land. Before you buy a home and there is a nearby vacant lot, always check the zoning beforehand. If that zoning already exists, that means those are rights that the property owner has already. The Planning Commission can't take those rights away without the property owner's permission. So just remember that. I encourage people, if you are ever worried about development, do not live next to a vacant lot. Just do not, because you lose control. If the property owner owns it, they're the only one who can request a change from the Planning Commission. So really keep that in mind. But as Councilwoman Nice said, the community engagement piece is something that's very, very important. So know that if you are coming before the Planning Commission to have your piece of property rezoned so you can use it the way you want to, that will be a bare minimum requirement. We're going to ask that you meet with the neighbors. And if the answer is no, we're just going to keep delaying your project until you've done that. It is very important that you do it. But I think a thing that I want to make sure to tell you as neighbors of this community is sometimes we are bound by rights and uses that a piece of property has that pre-existed any approval that we had. And so if they have rights again already, we can't take them away without their permission. And so what happens a lot is you have these pieces of property, this vacant lot that people don't realize, oh, you can actually build this commercial lot on it. You can actually build this industrial lot on it. Those rights already existed, and neighbors come to me and say, well, why are you allowing this to happen? And it's, well, they already had those rights already. So that's why it's really, really important you understand that aspect of things. Another thing that I think is really important is understand that city staff are there to help you through that process. If you need help with rezoning, city staff, without you having to hire an attorney, will walk you through this process one by one. And if you run into any trouble with that, you let me know, you let Councilwoman Nice know, because it's really important to understand that those are available resources for you. The other thing to keep in mind is timing. It takes a long time, several weeks to get these rezoning projects through the Planning Commission. So prepare yourself for a couple of months of having to go through that process. So that's just my kind of overhead view of things.
Kamal, I'm sorry, before
Please.
Elizabeth. I want you to talk about that preliminary plat that we had that has 600.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one. So way out, Midwest Boulevard, very rural part of Ward 7. We had a developer come in and say, we're going to build a lot of houses. I mean, 600 and something houses. This is the middle of a completely rural. We're talking about ranches. We are talking about people living on 5-acre lots. And these people are going to come in and build 600 homes just right in the middle of this community. I mean, some of the streets were not even fully paved in this area. And we said, well, there's no way we're going to allow this. Turns out, when the city expanded decades ago, when they incorporated new pieces of land, they automatically made it R1. So that's residential, that's single family homes. It was automatically done. And so the neighbors were upset with us saying, how could you possibly allow these things to go through? And we still voted it down anyway. And so now it's in court. So we'll see how it turns out. But that's just a classic example of the city incorporated it, gave the property owner those rights when clearly the infrastructure is not there. That's not something that the neighbors who live there anticipated. It was not a good situation, and hopefully we'll win in court. At least the municipal council, the city attorney told us we have a good shot. So hopefully that happens. But that's a good example.
At the Alliance, we engage with developers in a couple of different ways. One would be we have RFPs that are on our website. So those are specific pieces of land or maybe even a specific building, and you can respond to that RFP and you can respond with your proposal, with your idea of that. And then we review it, and then we look at a lot of different things and then kind of pick the best proposal from that pool of proposals. The other way that we engage with the developers is we're kind of master coordinators in a way. So once you're ready, once you have your idea, once you have some of your initial funding, then we kind of help with all of the rest of the pieces. Kind of, have you thought about this and have you thought about that? And so we kind of look at your project and we can maybe help you think through some different things, but you have to have those numbers, what we call pro forma. You kind of have to have that. And so that way we can see, oh, okay, you're in this district, so therefore maybe you can qualify for some historic tax credits, or maybe you're in a TIF, and so maybe there's some TIF funding that can go into this. And so there's a lot of different pieces that we're familiar with that we might be able to shed some light into your development. And so with developers, that's really what we do. And often, sometimes even maybe you have the plan and the capital, but you don't have the land. Well, we manage some entities that do have land, and so then we're able to kind of coordinate land and your project together. So again, there's just a lot of different things that we can look at your project through in that lens and really be able to offer maybe some either solutions to some problems that you might have, or we might be able to kind of work out some type of coordination that we might be able to help you through.
And I'd like to get everybody's perspective on this. So now that we have an understanding of how your organization or your role engages with developers, from your perspective, when do the successful developers start those conversations? Is it, hey, I have a piece of land and I have this idea, or maybe I don't have an idea yet, but I want to know what. So what do those, like, when does that need to happen? When does that engagement, when do those conversations, when do they need to happen in order for a developer to really be successful in what they do?
I would say after if you have obtained the land, then the conversation starts, in my opinion, in order for you to have real conversations as far as a community aspect is concerned. And a lot of the things that have happened, in my opinion, in Northeast Oklahoma City is people tell us all these plans and then we don't see these things happen. So that's one of the things that I encourage folks when they're like, we want to talk to the community. It's like, hold up. Is this your land? I would probably advise you to acquire the land, then let's have a conversation about what we can do with it or what the best uses are or your idea that you have. But it's difficult for me to support things such as that when you don't have it. You know, it's hard for me to tell the community, yeah, this is coming, and then all of a sudden, wait, I was just kidding y'all. That's actually not gonna happen this time. You know, and I think our community is burnt out on broken promises, empty promises, the things that have happened. I heard 23rd and MLK mentioned, and that's because of folks who own property that sit on it, or they don't have the community in mind about what they said they're going to do, and now you see what you don't have. So those are the things I encourage folks. Acquire the land first, and then let's have real conversations as far as engagement with the community. If you're going to engage with the people around you as far as your partners, whoever that is, fine. If you want to talk to my office to see what the possibilities could be, that's fine as well. And I can tell you from the things that I've heard from the community what they would like to see. If that's a piece of commercial property, or if it's in a community or a neighborhood. So those are things that I can help with, but I think we also, again, have to keep in mind the process, and I just wanted to go back to us talking about that development process, and Camal talked about it taking maybe a few weeks. I had just wrapped up a zoning case that we wrapped up Tuesday, and that has been in the process for almost 2 years. And the reason that happened is because I had a gentleman come to me about building an 8-plex. And the neighborhood said, oh, no, we don't want that in our community, even though it was across from a 12-plex. But this was zoned R1, so he could have put one home on it. But because of the conversations with that community throughout the first time, we denied it. Then he had to go back and get an attorney to help him through the process again. And that time he had proposed 4, and when we started with the 4, the neighbors were not as favorable, but they said okay. Then Camal and I worked to get that down as much as we could, and Camal took it from 4 from the Planning Commission to 3. And I said, okay, you do your work, and he tagged me, so then I got it down to 2. And so our neighbors were not pleased, but again, keep in mind, property rights. This was this man's property. So technically, this is the zoning change that he requested for his own property. So we have to keep those things in mind as well. And the fact that, again, there has to be compromise in these types of things, in these types of situations. So had we denied that and it went to district court, there's a possibility, and a favorable possibility, that this gentleman could have either gotten that 8-plex that he wanted originally, or 4 of these homes on this lot. So we have to be aware and really work through those types of situations too. So those things can be very tricky. But again, the process can take weeks, or it can take up to years, depending on the type of development that you are doing and the community engagement that you have. If it's lagging, it's going to take longer. So keep that in mind. If you're, as he said, we can defer it as many times as we want to. That's what we have the right to do. If we're not comfortable with what's happening either on the developer side or on the community side, we can defer it as many times until we get that engagement where it needs to be. So I probably didn't answer the question, so I apologize if I didn't, but I don't even remember what the question was.
No, it's okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
But Daisy, can you kind of speak to when a developer should start engaging with you if they have a development idea and they maybe need some help getting support from the public space?
Yeah, just go back to that community engagement, be a part of the community, volunteer, go to the festivals, shop in their businesses, that's how you learn what they need, and that's how you get their support and kind of not shorten the process, but once you get them engaged, that makes your project more favorable, and that kind of stops any community backlash once you really know what they want and if it fits your project or your idea. I'm from the South Side. Right now, we're getting a lot of new people who are looking to develop or bring new things into the South Side. So I'm very lucky that I got into the work that I am doing now at the right time, because then I'm able to have these conversations beforehand or meet people who are having these ideas for these projects and get to just engage more community. And we have Calle 25 on Historic Capitol Hill. That district is looking to get redeveloped very soon. We have a lot of vacant buildings. And so as a south portion of the Sister Toll Park opens, that will bring a lot of new people who never crossed south of the river, a lot of tourists, a lot of more revenue for our small businesses. So I'm working hard to get small businesses into those buildings, trying to see, now that I have a full-time job, I started in February, I actually have resources to provide to these businesses. Before, when I was a student, I was just offering like social media and trying to tell them, are you guys ready to upscale? Are you ready to receive this revenue? What can you do to make sure that these public developments are going to be favorable to your business? And so I would say, basically, just be in the community, volunteer. There's a lot of events and there's a lot of things that are going on. Be in these natural gathering spaces and learn what that community needs and wants before just buying land and saying, I have this idea, it's going to work, and I'm just going to bring whoever and everyone's going to come to it. It means more when it comes from the community, because then you have that natural support there.
I think just because I was asked to talk more about process things, I want to say a process thing that I think it's very important. Before you go before the Planning Commission, so you've gone through the process, you've obtained some piece of property, you own it, you have applied to have the zoning of that property changed. Know that before you come to the Planning Commission, they send out notice to the neighbors within, and Nikki can correct me, within 300 feet, or you have to reach a certain number of people. Is it 15, 12?
Yes, it can be up to 600 feet.
Up to 600 feet in order for you to get to that number of people. The notices are terrible. And we have tried. We have had numerous meetings about how we could change the law to make the notice more effective. But it is very important to understand that you will receive that notice by mail. Any mail you receive from the city of Oklahoma City, you need to read it carefully, because that is a really important, that notice piece is really, really important. And so I think that scares a lot of people when they just suddenly get the notice and say, wait, this thing is going to happen? These are all the possibilities, the implications of this rezone, and they get scared. You want to be, as the developer, you want to set the positive tone for what those expectations are. The first time people should be hearing about your development shouldn't be when they get that notice in the mail. If you want to create problems, do that. Because that's usually where we end up, is some neighbor calls me and says, Camal, I had no idea. And I'm thinking, I don't get notice of it either. The Planning Commission does not we don't get our agenda until the Friday before the Thursday meeting. So that is less than a week for us to review everything that's happened, have community conversations. The neighbors get the notice before we do. So just keep that in mind, that's really important. You want to have that conversation before neighbors already have it. I also think that it's really important to understand the community's expectations. And we have had a lot of trauma in Northeast Oklahoma City, and this was alluded to in the previous panel. And so there's a lot of fear and apprehension about development because of broken promises, because of the mistreatment that has happened in the past. And so go into it knowing that, instead of going into it assuming everyone's going to greet your new idea with automatic positivity. Go into it understanding that we are a community that's been through a lot of challenges and a lot of broken promises. And so when you have that empathy, I think you will be more successful in the long run.
For the Alliance, I think one of the questions you asked was what does it look like when a successful developer comes in? At what point do they come? For us, it's kind of when a successful developer comes and kind of says, here's the project. It's kind of like a puzzle box, like they have all of these pieces, and we kind of help them put that puzzle together. And so as for you and kind of thinking about your development and being a future developer and being a developer in the area, really just know your numbers, know what it is that you have, know what's going on in the area, and just kind of know your stuff, so that way whenever you do approach us and we do have these conversations, we are able to say, do you know what zoning area you're in? Do you know what TIF district you're in? Do you know if your building's a historic building? Do you know the area, if it's a low income area, because you might qualify for some low income taxing credits? So all of this type of data and information, you need to know your piece of property better than we can, and then that's the biggest piece. And then kind of like on the Southwest 29th Street district in the commercial portion, when developers come to us and say, hey, this is the plan and this is what we want to do you know of a place where they're looking to do this? So for example, this like live, work, and play idea, like on the commercial corridor, we have some investments that we're investing in that area in order to make it better and more walkable and all of these stuff. So how can your investment be matched to that already existing investment, so that way your return on investment is going to be higher? So when you have different areas that are already doing something, then your development is going to be picked up really fast, going to have some traction, and it's going to be better for you. So either you have the capital and you're ready to do all of these things, and then you go and you seek an area, or you have your piece of property and you know it inside and out, and you know all of the things about it, so that way when we're strategizing and figuring things out, you're able to kind of have all of the answers while we're kind of saying, okay, then in that case, let's do this. Okay, then in that case, let's go ahead and try to work this out. Or your specific problems, so that way we know how to specifically answer them.
That's good. Daisy, you had mentioned that Progress OKC has developed about 9 homes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most, if not all of those homes have been sold for what would be considered lower than market, correct? To make housing affordable for developers out here that are maybe focused on single-family residential or small-scale multifamily. What are some ways that they can potentially do what you all did in terms of being able to develop a project and bring it online at a price that's affordable, where they can still end up in the black at the end of the day?
So for that, I would say we leverage multiple capital sources. I can't really speak much to that because I am not over the residential homes that we build. I'm over the small business programs that we do. But I do know that we do receive funds from different sources, and then try to leverage the other programs that are in the city already. So like, what would it be? CBDG funding that we have, HUD funding and stuff like that, to the home funds, yes, to make then these homes under market and to, provide the service that we're doing.
So you are saying that there is a way for developers to bring equitable, affordable developments to a community to where at the end of the day, they can still end up making a profit, right?
Yes, you do have to tap into those resources, into those different pots of money. That's the way that we do it. And there's probably Councilwoman Nice has a little bit more that she can add to that and how to do that.
It's a lot of, I'll say this, public-private partnerships are the key to do those types of developments. The city does, as she said, we have funds, CDBG funds, we do have home funds. I'm going to say some of those are going to be a little more difficult. I'm not going to say they're going to be easy to obtain, because they're not, because of the process for them. And some of that is federal funding. So just be aware of what they are, and we're more than happy to figure out how to help you in that process to see if you can qualify, and to find out even what some of those other gaps as far as funding could be. As we heard about the TIF area, there's funding for that project area. There's so there are ways to fill in some of those gaps. And again, It's private-public partnerships that are going to be key. But please, again, if there is a way for you to make it affordable for your residents, let's work that out. If you do want to have market rate, fine, let's work that out as well. But I think, in my opinion, for our community, I know we hear gentrification. It is a word because it is a wildfire right now happening in our community. I'm not naive to that. I know it. And the question is, how do we ensure, especially for you all in here, that we are keeping our community in place? If we're gentrifying, how do we do that? How do we gentrify our communities to make sure our community is able to take advantage of what's happening and being a part of the process? And that's what you all, I believe and know, are here to do that thoughtfully and, again, with the community in mind. So public-private partnerships is definitely the key for that.
And then, Elizabeth, you mentioned a couple things like TIF, historic tax credits, low-income housing tax credits. For those of us in the room that aren't familiar with what those are, could you just kind of, on a very high level, speak to those things and what they are, what they do?
Yeah, essentially it's some gap funding. So again, you have your project, and you know that your project is going to bring, so TIF is some gap funding. You have your project, you know that your project is going to bring in, you already have the place, you have the amount of rent that you're probably going to charge, you have maybe even already a tenant who's probably going to be in there. You know you're going to be making X amount of dollars per year, and you know that your project is going to cost you X amount of dollars as well. So you have all of these numbers already set, and then you're still short. Let's say you're short $1 million in order to make this project happen. You can then go to the city and you can request these TIF funds if you're in a TIF district, which this district, their taxes are increased for a certain amount of time. Usually it's about 10 years. And so their taxes are increased in that time. That pot of money is then used for these projects. So that's TIF, and it's way more complicated than that. But then there's also the historic tax credit. So if your building is super old and you're wanting to renovate it and keep the historic integrity of it, then you can ask for some money in order to do that, because historic preservation is really expensive. And so you know that in order to preserve this building, it's going to cost you $1 million, but you were really only prepared to spend $500,000, then you can maybe look into historic tax credits and see how they can help you with like the renovation of the building. There's also, I think I kind of wrote them down just because. Yeah.
And not to cut you off, but do you have to, as a developer, do you have to be accredited, or do you have to have any type of special licenses or anything like that to tap into these public resources like TIF or historic tax credits or anything like that?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Again, when we get kind of everybody in that room, for sure Kathy O'Connor would be in that room and in those conversations, and she would definitely know. I don't know the answer to that. Kamal, you might know in terms of like, no. It's like, no.
I'll say this, if you don't mind. Anybody should be able to, technically, because as taxpayers, you should be able to tap into this funding. However, we know that's a whole different story. So it's a process, again, that we have to even ensure that we're working together to make sure you all or whoever is asking for that funding knows the process, because there's a lot of us, as far as our communities, who are unaware of how that process works. The problem is we haven't been educated on the process to know what it is, how we can tap into it, and other folks, they go about their business and they get millions of dollars, and we're still trying to figure out how we're going to make this development or this piece or fill this gap or find some money, ask some cousins to help us fund these projects. So there's a way for us to look at how we can do that, and I am more than happy to help, because that's why this particular TIF was created, for our community to benefit. And I'd be remiss if I did not recognize the councilman who did that, and he's here, Councilman John Pettis. So that time clock started, and it's a 25-year time clock for this tax increment finance for, I believe it's called TIF 11, which is the Northeast Renaissance TIF. Am I right, Pettis? Nah, thank you. We got so many of them. I'm like, which one is that? So it's TIF number 9. If you go to our OKC.gov website, you can look up our TIFs to understand where all of our TIF districts are. And we have quite a few. We're sitting in one right now. So this is, I believe, the Innovation District TIF that we have that's created. So there's a lot of different ways for us to receive funding. Again, this is a part of a process, and hopefully we'll have another conversation how we can all tap into the TIF and benefit from that funding as well.
And then Councilwoman Nice, can you speak to, so a lot of the people in the room, they're going to be taking on private development projects, but within a community, it's more than just private space. There's public space as well. So when we start seeing renaissances or transformation in communities, how do the private projects that real estate developers take on, how do those impact public space, and how can we make sure as developers that there's a cohesiveness with private development and public development, whether it be parks, schools? Can you kind of speak to how all that kind of works together?
It's engagement. That's the only way it can work, is to make sure, again, you're engaging the people around you, especially private developments. I know on the 26th we'll be having a conversation at the Page Woodson at Douglas regarding Northeast community projects. If you are able to come, please do. We want you to know about these private developments that are about to take place in Northeast Oklahoma City that can have, they will have an impact on our communities. Now, how we respond to that is how the impact can become. It's either going to be positive or it's going to be negative. So that depends on not just us, but it depends on the developers themselves, on how they engage and how they incorporate community members, subcontractors, those who look like and reflect the community in which they plan on developing these private developments. So that's my suggestion as far as anything that happens. You can't do anything without the community involved in these conversations in order for you to have the positive feedback that you want. And I tell people that come into my office as far as development is concerned all day long, if the community is not supporting this, don't expect me to. Don't expect me to support this. There are ways we can tweak these things. Let's figure out how to do that. Because again, I understand the impacts of growing up in the community and having these things, and then growing up and getting older and seeing these things leave and not understanding why we had to drive further for so many other things, until I get to adulthood and say, oh, that's what happened. Now, how do we bring those things back? How do we make sure our community is a part of this process? How do we make sure you all in this room are being at the table in order for these things to occur and to benefit in the process as well?
That's great. And before we go into Q&A, is there a centralized resource or hub where these developers can get more information, more context as to what these private-public partnerships look like, and available resources that they can tap into for some of their projects?
I think one of the things that we heard is the Alliance for Economic Development. They have a lot of our urban renewal property, they have all of our urban renewal property. So please look into how you can develop on those lots, and we'll talk about that on the 26th as well, the process. And also, after you talk to them or before you talk to them, call my office, call Camal, let's talk about it. So I'm aware, at least and we're aware of these things too, so we can keep them on our radar, so we can make sure everybody's being held accountable for how or what is going to take place. Because again, You know, and that's why we're having the conversation on the 26th with these different developments. It's easy to hold me in this local elected office accountable, right? But how do we hold these other developers accountable for what they're doing as well? It takes all of us to do that. So you can bark at me all day long, but if we're all not barking at whoever is doing this to us and without us, then that's going to be the problem. And in my opinion, it's time out for our communities as far as that is concerned to not be a part of this process if we can help that. But my other suggestion is OKC.gov as far as some of those other ways that you can find out about our city entity as far as programs, resources, and as we talked about, even our land use plan, our Adapt OKC, we have a Bike Walk OKC. So there are so many different things that are happening that pertain to Northeast Oklahoma City where a plan has been created. Now, can that plan be tweaked? Absolutely, we can do that. And consider as well, we have MAPS 4. And she's sitting on that advisory committee for MAPS 4. We're wrapping up MAPS 3, but MAPS 4 is the most important thing because we have, of that $1 billion that's coming from MAPS 4, $100 million being invested in Northeast Oklahoma City. So this is not something to take lightly, but this is something to take seriously because we need community as far as those subcontractors, as far as developers, as far as all of those pieces of what MAPS 4 can bring to make it a positive impact on our community as well.
Great, thank you for that. And I think we have time for about one or two questions. So do we have any questions in the room? I see a gentleman back there.
Good morning. I was curious, how many developers missed the mark potentially with positive intent that just wasn't in alignment with community versus somebody that was just trying to make the numbers work? Because it almost sounds like every time it's, oh, if you're money hungry, you're going to miss it. But if you come in with the community in mind and positivity, it'll be right on. But do you all see people that had the community in mind but still, quote unquote, missed the mark or just wasn't in full alignment like they might have thought they were? Do you all see that in any case?
From what I've seen is I have a friend who's a developer himself, and they are very community minded. They are from the Hispanic community, and they are trying to help, bring this vision that we have to life. But there is that lack of access to capital that is keeping them from to have their project come to life, right? And so that's where like networking with one another, meeting different people, banks, people who are then willing to support these efforts. And so you can come with all the great intentions and everything, but there's still those very, those challenges and those barriers that just coming from a community of color, I don't know, the banking system and stuff like that wasn't built for us. So it's just bringing all the pieces together and trying to make it work. And sometimes some projects do work, sometimes they don't. You just got to keep pushing and keep going until you find something that clicks and that works for you and your community and just fits that puzzle.
I think I'll add that I do think that sometimes there are people who are well-intentioned who definitely miss the mark. And as Councilwoman Nice was talking about the project, and this is also in my neighborhood right over here, where the developer was trying to bring the 8-plex, and then we ended up down to 2 houses eventually, years later. I think he was well-intentioned. I think he thought he was doing something that would be good for the neighborhood. That was what he thought. But I think that's why it's so important that we respect a process of engagement and be deliberate and be patient and be intentional and understand that the process of bringing it is oftentimes as important as the outcome you're hoping to achieve. And so I think when people try to, ignore the fact that you're going to have to take the feedback that neighbors give you and change your mind about what you had in mind if you want to avoid missing the mark. And so I think going in with that open mind is going to be really important and being very intentional, very deliberate about the process of rolling it out and getting that public feedback is important.
And I can give you an example of negative, 2030 MLK. That's negative. Because the intention, they said, oh, we're going to give you this grandiose grocery store. We're going to do all of these things. Then all of a sudden, they brought it down to one of those cash savers, a smart saver model, with the 10% on top of 10%. Then they closed. Then they tore it down. Then they promised another, and we're still waiting. And that was in 2019. So that's a prime example, and they still own the property, by the way. So I know a lot of people think the city own it. We don't. 22 acres held hostage by someone who does not live in Northeast Oklahoma City.
And then we got one here and then one more right back here.
Elizabeth, you were talking about how helpful you are with developers on the front end of kind of like working with their pro formas and their models, you know, on the various development opportunities you have for people. After you award or, you know, say, yes, you have been awarded this site, we approve your plan, do you guys go away or do you kind of work with us throughout that entire process? I mean, or kind of, you know, when do you guys kind of say you guys got it?
Yeah, so on the RFP side, if we release an RFP, we'll help through that process. But then on the other side, if you're the developer and you bring a piece of property, we can help coordinate all of these different things, and we can help with the city because they're the ones who award the TIF or a lot of these different public incentives. They're the ones who kind of award all of that, and so we really just help maneuver through that process. So that's the piece that we kind of help through. And then, but if it's on the RFP side, you know, we have all of these different things and these different timelines that are discussed. We also have an agreement. In that agreement, you're able to see, you know, what all is going to be done. You have these timelines. You should be able to start your project. You should be able to end. If you have problems with permitting process throughout that time, again, we're coordinating and we're working with the city planning department to be able to help you in this project. And hey, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? All of that different stuff. Yes, our goal is to help people through those processes with the RFPs that we release. And then there's other ones that you might have a different project, and again, that looks like a whole different thing for everybody.
Fantastic. And then our last one there in the back.
I wanted to address one of the questions that was asked that there was not an answer for, concerning what are we looking for, what are people looking for, what kind of prerequisites you have to have when you make application for funding or for anything else with regards to public lands. Based on my own personal experience, I can say that one of the things that's really necessary is to have some experience in development. You need to have a track record. It's not enough to have a great idea or a lot of energy or enthusiasm. If you don't have the track record to support you, that can be a stumbling block. And how do you get that experience if you're like a lot of us here who are new developers? And I find that the way to do that is to partner with someone who has the experience. Because that's the only way you're going to get the credibility that'll allow you to go in and ask for or apply for an RFP for Akura land, or to seek the funding that you're going to need in order to make your project work. So.
Yeah, so I think so just for everyone's information, if you go onto the Alliance website, you can go onto www.theallianceokc.com and .org, and you can look in the RFP tabs. Under the RFP tabs, you'll see the residential RFPs. And so if you're wanting to be a developer for small residential homes, you can look into that and you'll be able to see the requirements. They'll be like A through F, and it'll tell you exactly what it is that you need. And so for those type of things, you only need your proof of funding. You need what type of home it is that you're going to build. You need who's going to build it, your builder. So a lot of these different things would be a great place to start for these small residential developments. Now, when you're going into bigger commercial developments, that's when you need definitely a lot more in order to win these RFPs. you do want to see their different projects from the past. And yes, the ideas are obviously really big, but if you don't have the experience to make this happen, it does become a problem sometimes. It's like, how do we know you're able to execute this awesome idea? And so if you have that partnership, like she's talking about, if you have these different connections, like Daisy was talking about, then you're able to really amp up your proposals. So yeah, those are all things. And usually, if you're responding to some type of proposal, it'll tell you everything that it is that you need on there. And there's so many different pieces that you need to connect with different people for. So that's why it's important to have a good relationship with your banking institutions, and again, meet other developers that are successful and maybe ask them to kind of help you become a partner for them. Just kind of different things like this. All of this is connections that you definitely should be working on now.
And I want to add that I think, if I'm correct, CBDG funds and other funds, they get decided by committees, right? And then those committees have representatives from each ward. And so I would make it a point to go on the city website and find out these different committees and then get appointed with whoever's representing your ward. That way you know who is deciding where these funds go to, and so they can have your name as well and be up to date with your projects and what are you doing, if you can align those two together.
That's all really good stuff. Well, I want to thank the four of you for sitting on this panel today and having this conversation. My biggest takeaways from this is, as an emerging and an aspiring developer, there's sometimes projects that we want to bring online where the numbers just maybe don't pencil out, but there are resources available to us in terms of our public-private partnerships that can allow us to bring potential projects to a community that's really needed. And then the other takeaway is that there's agencies within the public space that we really need to be engaging with kind of on the front end of all of our development projects, just to make sure that we're not wasting any time, wasting any resources, wasting any energy, or wasting any money. So again, I want to thank the four of you all. If we could give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.